Hello, this is Aaron Maller from Parallax, and this video is just a quick dive into some additional functionality for putting trim pieces on doors. So it's 100% possible with the door library that you currently have. The way it needs to happen, of course, is that you would simply go into the frame family and model the additional trim inside it, and then you would swap inside this door family to pick that new kind of frame. It has to be done in the frame component, and I just want to rehash the reason why before I show you what we're proposing. So I want you to keep in mind that right now what we refer to as the door size is actually the size of the panels themselves. Now that's an important distinction because if we take the overall door family, which is called single swing, and we tell it to get a frame that has, for instance, two side lights, like so. What's important to realize is that this overall door family is never actually aware of this dimension. Okay, that's because we're specifying the size of the blue opening, and then the frame family, which is below the door, is handling everything below it. That's why we can have side lights justified to one side. We can have side lights that are a single, or we can have side lights that are also double, where they are both sides justified. Like so. I picked one with an intermediate style on accident, but of course you get the point. So the issue here is that the door itself is not aware of the overall size of the frame, hence we want any trim around the door to be inside the frame object. Now that's 100% doable, and so this is a mocked up change which actually wasn't all that difficult. And in this situation, exactly like what we discussed up here, you would have frames that you could build. So in this case, I've created 3 different variations of trim. So these are all what we call a standard frame. Now what's neat about it is if you were to tab select the frame itself, the frames can then have options for what kind of trim is on one side and what kind of trim is on the other. So if we go look at this in plan, you'll see here that I've picked one that has the same trim on both sides. Now they're off the wall, and that's because we do have to take into consideration some of how these frames currently interact with the wall. Now it's easy to adjust the frame offsets from the wall down to 0, and now our trims are sitting right on the wall. So to show you an example, I've configured a family called trim condition 001, and that simply has the profile 8846 on both sides. Now I have also configured what we call trim condition 2, which has a different profile on one of the sides, and then I've created trim condition 3, which has the other profile on both sides. Now, what we wanted to build in when we were talking through this, which is kind of neat, is the way we've done this, you have some configurations of the trims that you don't have to go into the frame to build variations for. So as an example, I've used the trim condition 2, which is just a frame selection, but now I can say, you know what, on the pull side of the door I want to offset the trim by 2 inches, and now it's going to move out. Or maybe I want to offset it by 1.125 inches, depending on what exactly we're making, and I want to do the same thing for the height on the pull side, so I can change that as well. You didn't see that change, of course, but now it has offset itself, and so there is the exposed actual frame profile, and then there's the trim around it. So you'd be able to control the trim family in terms of its offset from what we call the main opening. Now what the main opening is would of course change frame by frame. And if we just go back to this example, you know, what we would be doing is the trim families that get put in the frame in this case would of course respond to the opening that is that shape, and we can do that when it's built inside the frame level. So the offset value that we just typed in would apply here, and then of course the head one would apply here. Similarly, if there was a transom, it could also apply above the transom. So what it would mean is you would have a library of additional frames. Now don't get hung up on the nomenclature here because this was just a first pass. But we think it's pretty functional, and the added convenience of being able to drive the offsets in the parent family feels pretty nice, because we think that'll cut down on variations that we need for the different frames. The one thing we haven't accounted for quite yet is a situation where this did still want its offset from the wall like this, and we wanted the ability to offset the trim in either a fore or aft direction in relation to the rest of the frame's face, if you will. That is possible 100%. We just haven't looked into implementing that yet. So just wanted to give you a preview so that you could understand why we're still taking a few minutes, a couple of days, whatever, to look into this. It's 100% possible with the doors that you already have. In that case, it's just as simple as going into the frame, doing a save as, and adding in any trim that you want. Obviously, to do that, it's just going to be more effort on everybody's side. So what we're actually thinking of right now is the way we've implemented this as an option for a frame. If we look at our entire frame library, right, for any particular frame, we currently have a profile that's aluminum, a profile that's hollow metal, and then a couple of variations in wood. There would simply just now also be a version that has what we'll call a default trim condition. So we would have, wood 1, wood 2, but then maybe wood 1 with trim. And because the trim objects are nested families and they are swappable and we can use profiles to drive them, users would be able to kind of build their own configurations very quickly. But what we're thinking of right now is we would tear through the entire frame library and have a trim option for each one. The only frames that would be considered absolutely specialty are basically the two frames that we have right now that aren't rectangular in shape. They, of course, could still have trims on them, but it would have to be a very custom trim family. Not the end of the world, totally doable, but at that point they may just become different frames. So it's absolutely doable the way you have the doors now. I just think if we make this change in the door library, that'll be more extensible for users to learn. So I wanted to show it to you so that you knew what we were up to and get your thoughts.